All right, as we're going to continue on, thank you all so much for those sticking around. I hope this will be beneficial to you as we continue talking about these things that are occurring. Give me a little laser pointer out here as we continue, because we're going to talk about, and this is going to be kind of to the close of our study over this great support for the papacy or the Pope. That's going to be coming up, and again talking about this medieval Roman church. So we'll talk about it a little bit today. Should be able to get through all of it, hopefully. And then we're going to kind of change gears and talk about some other events that were happening around the world at that time that were influencing some of these things that I think will be beneficial to you, help you in understanding some of those things. And then we're going to begin to look at this great pushback that we have over these individuals doing these things. So what we're looking at is the sources of support for the papacy. So what we're looking at is this individual trying to arise, and he's going to take power, and he's going to kind of be controlling these things. But how does he get this power? And we're going to look at it three different ways in which he's going to be doing this. The first is going to be the recognition by secular rulers. So what we're going to notice is these individuals that are governing agents that are going to be around, that they're going to begin to start pushing towards this rule of this bishop and this pope there in Rome. So in 392 A.D., Theodius the Great declared all heathen sacrifices treason, and Christianity was declared the state religion. So what brings this about? We have to understand that shortly after Christianity receives recognition by the Roman rulers. So we recall that Constantine and those men, they're making Christianity the state religion. So now you can practice Christianity. We discussed that. They were giving them land, giving them property back. So they're doing all this great stuff. So now that they're with peace, they have a great push to do a lot more missionary work. So they're beginning to go out of this Roman Empire, and they're beginning to bring other people in. So Christians began to take the gospel to the heathen tribes outside the Roman Empire. So we're going to look at a map here in just a moment and look at these tribes. But what we're noticing is they're going to try to go out and convert, right? This is the state religion. Everybody is going to be a part of this church, though as we made point, and I'll try to emphasize it one more time, this isn't the church that we read about in the Bible. This is the apostasy that's being talked about, that they're going about doing things against what the Bible says. But this church, again, taking this rule in the Roman Empire, and through these powers that are given them, they're getting stronger and stronger, but not the church that we read about in Acts. Now, in the empire, as we talked about, the heathen worship and its priesthoods and temples began to fall into discredit. So what did we have at that time? We had all of these false gods that they were making, and then you go outside of the Roman Empire and you have all these tribes, and they're having all their type of gods. So they're pretty much just going to say, you know what, no more pagan worship like that. So soon Theodius the Great declared all heathen sacrifices treason, and Christianity was declared the state religion. So they said, you can't practice these things anymore. This is the religion that you're going to have to follow. So Constantine moves the government seat to Byzantine. We might remember that from some of our past studies. Later, Constantinople. So this is important as this kingdom is kind of becoming divided. Now, he did part of this to alleviate the pressure from the northern barbaric tribes. So I'm going to show you a slide here in just a moment. So they're going over to Constantinople. So these other people, they're kind of getting away from these attacks that are coming in. And then from that, the bishop at Rome is gaining a little bit more power because there's not really anybody there that's really keeping him in line. So he moves it over from that. So let's look at our slide here, and I'm going to try to, I've got that, all right, turned on. All right, so we'll make a note of it. I got a few slides here, so this is important. So you got Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire. Here's Constantinople there in the middle, and we have Rome right there in the boot of Italy. So it's a divided kingdom, essentially. So what they're worried about are these tribes that are going to be coming down from this area, what they would call Germanic tribes, these native tribes that Rome had not. So this is the empire. So this is the fringe. So these people weren't Romans. They were their own people. So they're coming in and attacking. And it's what we're going to find, that Rome is so spread out, and it becomes a little bit harder for them to gain that authority and power to keep everybody in check. Now we have the emperor again moving to the capital over here to get away from all this stuff. But what we're having is these nations coming in. So, skipping out just a little bit from our class, but tying in with it and tying in with what we have. When we discuss in the Revelation about Rome and them being destroyed, who would it be that would come in? So we have to understand this. So what you have here again is the Roman Empire. There's the hill. There's Italy. So here's Greece. Here's the 7 churches of Asia being right down in here. So look at all these empires. You have the Hun Empire, and that's what I believe. I went to go back and look, but I think Brother Shepherd in the Gospel Advocate in Revelation, I think he thinks the star there in Revelation 9 is Attila the Hun that's going to be coming down. I don't know that that's exactly accurate, but that's his thoughts on it nonetheless. So what you have is all these nations that are over here that are going to be attacking. Again, you can see the line, and that being the Roman Empire. So they're going to be attacking this empire. So when we discuss the fall of Rome and how Rome is going to be destroyed and how these individuals are persecuting the churches, again, the churches that are right here, right beside this E in empire, if you can't see my red dot there, that these churches are right here. So all these empires that are coming down affecting Rome, they were going to be destroying them. And we hear historically about these individuals coming in. Let's look at this next slide. Noticing this, right? Here we are, the Eastern Roman Empire. This is where the 7 churches would be located. And look at all the nations that would come in and attack. And this, as you see down here, these Visigoths, that's a big deal right there. The Visigoths coming down and attacking, coming in on that peninsula and destroying a lot of these things. Now, if I'm Rome and my empire is being attacked, I'm probably going to let off of the Christians and I'm going to begin to attack the people that are attacking us. But look, the Hun capital, you have the Huns coming down and attacking as well. And that's why I lead some to believe Attila the Hun may be this angel that's going, or this star that falls from heaven that God raises up, and that he comes in and destroys all those people, destroying the Romans. Again, saying, listen, destruction's coming. Here's Rome. That's what's going to happen to Rome. All these nations are going to be coming in and attacking them, and that's what we find. So in this slide right here, you can see a little better. There's Rome. There's the boot heel, or the boot there in Italy. Here's Greece. Here's the 7 churches of Asia right there. So when you're looking at that and you're saying, don't worry, churches, right? Rome's going to be destroyed. Here's what we're talking about, is that these nations were going to be coming in. It wasn't just Rome was going to just kind of disband and leave. Again, looking back at that other slide, here's the Eastern Roman Empire under that heading. Here's the churches. We have them here now all being destroyed. So this is what's coming about. So this caused the nation to be separated as depicted in this slide. You have the lighter gray. Over here is the Western Roman Empire, and over here is the Eastern Roman Empire, because all of these tribes, these barbaric, they would call them barbarians, coming down because they were not Romans. So that's what we have taking place at this time in Rome. Again, taking place here, what we're reading about in the Revelation, though not happening that at the exact same time, but this is what was going to happen. These nations were going to be coming in, and ultimately they were going to destroy Rome. And again, we see this shift of power from the Roman emperor into this one man, and that's what we're going to be continuing to look at as we go through this. So all these Germanic tribes accepted some form of Christianity either before or just after coming into the Roman Empire. So we have these nations coming down, they're accepting Christianity. So Clovis, king of the Franks, an individual that was over there in Europe, closer to Spain, he decided to be baptized and then commanded his whole army to be baptized as well. So again, obviously you can't command a whole army to be baptized. That goes against the conviction of the individual. But nonetheless, the pagans were Christianized, if you will. And then it in turn caused the church to be paganized, because you have all these individuals that aren't truly converted, and they're in the church and they're making these decisions. And we find that today, if you're not careful, we have individuals that come into the church and they're not fully converted. They may have just been baptized and they're still learning, but they're trying to make decisions and teach and do things. So you have to be careful about that even today. So that's what's happening. Now, in the midst of political turmoil and chaos, the people longed for a strong, centralized authority which could restrain lawlessness and restore order. This is vital. Because what you have now is, if you skip back a couple slides, again, all of these nations coming in. And all of this being broken apart, the empire is being crumbling. And again, as we talked about, you think about if the United States fell as a nation, so all of this stuff is happening. You no longer have the Roman rule, the Roman soldiers in these places. There's lawlessness. What are they saying? We want that again. We want peace. And it's important when we look back at that in the fullness of time, that Jesus came at the right time, right? He didn't come in the middle of all this chaos. He came under that Roman rule where there was peace in the land. It's just amazing when you go back and study things like that. So, you're looking at all these individuals coming down, and these nations are fighting, and next week, Lord willing, we'll talk a little bit about these, but you begin to talk about the invasion of the Muslims that are coming up, and they're looking at this and they're saying this is a necessity. We need a unification of forces, and these people have to be stopped. So next week, again, Lord willing, we'll talk about that rise coming up from the Muslims and how that impacted the church as well. So, here's what we're going to have. What is the world, if you will, this empire? What are they looking for? They're wanting centralized power. They're wanting all this chaos to be. They want one man. So here's where we get into what we're looking at is how they're going to put this one man in position. Now again, as we talked about in Revelation there about the beast, the one beast being Rome, there's going to be another beast coming along, and I think that's these bishops that are going to be moving up. So Charles Martel, with the aid of the Pope, arose to the occasion and repulsed the Muslims. So he's going to drive them individuals back, this man named Charles Martel. Now the Pope used his position to achieve political unity, and in return the ruler was glad to acknowledge and increase his spiritual power. So he's going to be building up this relationship. The Pope he's going to have a lot of authority, and so he's going to be moving himself up into this position of power. Now, when Charles dies in 741, his son Pippin took the throne. The Pope gave him his official blessing, with Pippin returning the favor by giving him temporal rule of the territory which he had took from the Lombards. Now, that's getting into a lot, so we're going to try to condense it. So what's happening is all these nations are fighting. There's land being lost. So they're going to gather this land from the Lombards, and what they're going to do is Pippin, because the Pope is blessing him, he said, well, hey, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. He said, I'm going to let you be ruler over this area that we took back from these individuals. So that's going to begin solidifying this rule of this Pope. Now, with Pippin's death in 768, the kingdom was divided between Charlemagne, you might have heard of that individual, and his brother Carloman. Now, Carloman, or Carloman, however you want to pronounce that, died in 771, and Charlemagne took control over the entire kingdom, attempting to strengthen and enlarge it. So what we have now, again, is Charlemagne, he's trying to unite, and that's the whole purpose behind so much of this is what we're looking at. Now, after the death of Charlemagne, his emperor was divided between three grandsons. So though he was trying to reunite this empire, this vast empire, he dies and it's given to three grandsons. Then in 962, Otto the Great was crowned emperor of the Romans. So he's going to end up taking control of this. And with this, we had the beginning of the Holy Roman Empire. Now this, again, we're shifting that direction, and that's what I'm trying to discuss there in Revelation. That this coming up, right, this Holy Roman Empire is going to have control of the Pope, and he's going to have the blessing, and he's going to be establishing himself in this regard. He's going to be getting more power and more power. Now, again, these secular rulers that are addressing them, there was three theories regarding the relationship between the Pope and the Emperor. So you have this Pope being set up here, and then you have the Emperor. Now, how do they coincide with each other? Now, one theory is God commissioned the Emperor and the Pope to rule on separate spheres. So God's saying you do this with what we commonly call like the separation of church and state. The Pope handles the church. The emperor handles the state. So this is the divided. Now the second thought was that the emperor was superior to the Pope in a separate sphere. So what they're saying is, well, actually the emperor was greater. But in the third point, the temporal power was subordinate to the spiritual, even in worldly affairs. So what we're getting at is that the Pope, he's coming down from God. He is this individual that God has demonstrated and put this trust in, given him this power. We are to follow him. So that's what we're looking at. Now, What we're looking at in these people in power, right? What we're looking, I think, is the secular rulers. Excuse me, the recognition by secular rulers. So these were individuals that were outside the church that were gaining power for the Pope. Now, what we're going to look at is the false documents. So this is important as we get into a lot of this that they're having trouble with, because they're passing off these documents as factual, and they're really just forgeries. So a Spanish archbishop named Isidore began to acquaint the church in Germany with classical and pastoric writings, or the writings of the Father, that pastoric. After he died, his reputation was used as authority for forgery, which forced the authority of the Roman bishops above that of the political rulers. So this is a man that's going to have power in his writings, that if his name is attached to these documents, that he's going to be able to have a lot of pull toward these popes. So again, these are corrupt men. These aren't righteous men. They've got power. They're wanting more power, and they're continuing this struggle. So now they have these documents that are going to be able to get passed around and say that they have more authority than what they have. So many of the barbarians were not as literate as the Romans. So again, we made note of this before. If I can't really read and I'm not educated as you are in the Romans, right, in this clergy, I'm the layman, well, I'm going to have trouble refuting you because I can't read anyway. I can't disprove you. So that's important as we continue on, especially getting on into more power of the church. So it seemed the church officials welcomed the deception, and the true nature of the false documents was concealed long enough to strengthen every branch of the ecclesiastical authority and to the Pope in a position of supreme authority. So they're like, hey, I'm getting more power, I'm getting more wealth. We see this even today, all of these things taking place. More things change, the more they stay the same, right? The more power you get, the more corrupt they're beginning to get. And it's like, all right, we're just going to use this to help spread and further our cause. So now, we have the first contained additions to the authentic apostolic canons by adding 59 writings of Roman bishops. So those that have been with us from the beginning, we understand that the canon, that it was the rule by what God has given, that the apostolic canon, this is the Bible. Now we're going to add 59 writings from guess who? The Roman bishops. They're God's men. They're going to be doing this. So here's one way in which they supported this. They would bring in this false doctrine. And I believe Clarence was in my office the other day. He and I were talking, and I got out a Catholic Bible, and I was showing and looking at that, where they're saying that even in that Bible that I have in my office, that the writings and the sayings of the Pope and those people held just as much authority as the Bible did. And that's printed in their Bible. Now, what's another document? We have the donation of Constantine. This is an interesting document that was passed around. Again, Constantine, and when they're doing this, oftentimes they're dropping what we would call a name drop. They're bringing out people that you've heard about and that hold authority and hold that. And they're like, okay, well, with this, I'll be able to pass it a little better. So the donation of Constantine. This document tells how Constantine was afflicted with leprosy and states that Peter and Paul, again, having those names being very important, appeared to him in a vision, telling him to have Pope Sylvester come and baptize him 3 times for the cleansing of his leprosy and removal of his sin. So they got this document floating around. Constantine, I've heard that name before. He said that this Pope was supposed to come and he cured him of his leprosy, and he cured him of he washed him away of his sins. So again, this authority being passed to these popes. Now, Constantine did this and exalted Sylvester. So again, we're having this bolster of these popes, and they're beginning to be exalted, and they're beginning to get more and more power, following after the Roman emperor. Now, its authority was unquestionable, and until the 15th century, right? The 15th century, when its authenticity was questioned by many scholars, and it was finally falsified, proven by Lorenzo Valla. So, but what we're going to get into as we kind of jump gears, continuing on, we're going to have the Renaissance era, where there's going to be more writing, there's going to be more literature, people are going to become educated, and they're going to be able to read and study, and what they're going to do is look at all this and say, wait a minute, this can't be right. This can't be an accurate document, but by that time, it's already done its damage. So, let's now look at papal support from the hierarchy. So again, these are the individuals that were within the Pope and within this construction of the Catholic Church, or the medieval Catholic Church, however you want to describe it. Now, the estimation of the papacy can result from trying to centralize authority. So this establishment is going to coming up. It went from congregational autonomy, where the plurality of elders ruled each church. What we have today, we go back to the Bible, and we say the Bible says that there were appointed elders in every church, and they have the rule over that. But they went from that. Again, the first break in that was the distinction between the elder and the bishop. We want elders, but we need a bishop. He's the main man over the congregation, and then he becomes over another one and over another. And that's the big, when they make that first transition over into this apostasy. So then it developed into the monarchical bishops, the diocesan of bishops, the patriarchs, and finally, again, the Pope is what we're finding. So again, all that being from that way, the Bible says, all the way up to what we have talking about at this present time. So this hierarchy, these individuals, we talked about it last week, that there were different divisions in the Catholic Church that had to make sure that all these people were doing and saying what they needed to be doing. Now, they developed two weapons to ensure the Pope's commands were carried out. Here's what we're looking at. We're running out of time. But let's look at this. The excommunication, and that's what we talked about in the worship hour, though I don't think this was happening at that time, but it may have been something similar to this. Now, the excommunication, which would make one a social outcast and remove the privileges of citizenship. So if you were needing anything, you were outcast. You were not a part of this church. You were outcast. And then that was a big thing in this type of classes of individuals, the social system going on at Rome at that time. Now, the other reason was that they were the interdict. And that was very important because that meant that I could refuse to perform marriages. I could refuse to bury the dead, and I had to, if they wouldn't follow what I was trying to get at. So they would refuse marriages and bury the dead. They wouldn't be able to perform this. So they wouldn't be able to give you the Lord's Supper. We talked about that, the sacraments. It became a holy thing. Only the priests were able to offer the Lord's Supper. Only the priests were able to marry individuals. Only the priests were able to bury someone. So if you didn't bow down to what I was saying as the Pope, then I would say, all right, in that area, whoever the bishop is, these people, you can't do that anymore. So that's what we're looking at, this power that they're gaining. So the church officials clarified that no man could reach God except through the hierarchy and the Pope. So that's what we're looking at. Here we go on our last slide as we finish this out. So the writings from a group of men known as the scholastics were to defend the truth of the Catholic Christianity by logic. This is what they were trying to do. They were writing these things, defending what they were holding, and by their work in 1215, the Lateran Council gave official sanction to the doctrine of transubstantiation, which means when they partake of the Eucharist, as they call it, that it's actually changing from a bread and the fruit of the vine to blood and a body. So transubstantiation, that's what that means. It would even include individuals making confessions to the priest once a year. So again, more power giving to the priest. So that's what these writings were doing. They were saying this is what you have to follow. So the scholastics also systemized and recognized canon law to give more power to the Pope. And the sacraments and a hierarchy found their most significant support at this time because the stronger the Pope grew, the more dependent the people came. So again, listen to where we're at. There's Rome, it's falling down. We want a centralized one-man rule, and we have the Pope. He's from God, right? He's God's appointed, and he's going to make these rules, and the stronger he gets, the more he has control over this area, and where I believe the shift in power comes from the Roman Empire and the emperor making all these laws and legislations to the Pope, where now we have him saying, well, if you don't follow what I say, this is what's going to happen to you. And this is what we have at the height of this Pope being this man that's setting up and ruling over these things. And just as Revelation was speaking about, that he's having the same kind of power as the first beast. That's my opinion. If you don't agree with that, that's okay. We can study our Bibles together and go from that. Now, I know that was a lot. That was a lot in the sermon. That's a lot in class. But we're getting to the close of Revelation, and that was so crucial, I think, as pointing to it again, as many of us have pointed out, it's interesting the timing of that's how we're discussing those things. So, Lord willing, next week we'll kind of jump gears off of this Roman medieval Catholic Church, and we'll kind of look at some other things and go from there. And then we're going to see where the opposition against it here in a few lessons. So, thank y'all all for being here. Is there any questions or comments maybe about any of that. Like I said, I know that was a lot. As always, you can go back and look at those, or if you want my notes or anything like that, I'll be happy to give them to you. Anybody got anything?